a plan.
We're very excited to have an incredibly talented group of composers with us today from all around the country. So I'd like to introduce, starting with Ned Beckley and Josh Hogan in Perth. Ned and Josh, welcome.
Hello.
Heading up to Brisbane, we've got Joff Bush. Joff, great to have you involved.
Hello. Thanks
And in Sydney, Helena Czajka. Helena, welcome.
Thanks. Hi, nice to be here.
And last but not least, down here in Melbourne, Craig Pilkington. Craig,
hello,
welcome.
everybody.
In terms of the shows that our composers have been associated with, which range across children's television, adult, documentaries, film, etc., but you might know them, Ned and Josh have been involved in the Tharlu series. That was one of the ACTF series. Joff has been involved in Are You Tougher Than Your Ancestors? And another little show called Bluey that some of you might have heard of. That's proved to be a worldwide success. And working with Joff on Bluey has been Helena. And Craig has been involved in Little Lunch and The Investigators. And you can see there over my shoulder on that side is Morty from The Investigators. So welcome to everyone. We're really delighted to have you here today. We've been asked a lot over the last year or two by students when we run webinars. They say, who's behind the music of the series? And what can you tell us about the music of my favourite children's series? So we thought it would be a great idea to get some of the most talented composers for children's television together. And that's what we've done today.
I started playing piano, but I'd say that the instrument that I really got into first was the drums. I feel a bit like I was doing piano because I was told to do piano, and that I'm sure there might be some kids out there who might feel like that. But then I really learned to love the piano as I got older. But yeah, the drums was the first one really where I got to really kind of make a sound that I was into. And it was actually like the snare drum. I'd sit there practicing like marching band things. That's the short answer to that one.
Fantastic. And Ned, what about for you?
My first instrument that I learned on was the guitar in primary school, and I had a really good blues teacher, and he'd teach us the 12-bar blues and to improvise. And then I didn't start like properly making music until I was probably 15, and I was deep into hip hop then, and I would sample lots of records and all my dad's jazz records, and that's when I really got serious into making music. Okay,
fantastic. And Joff, what about for you?
Oh, I think probably similar to Ned. I started on piano when I was maybe 6 or something, and I remember actually I tried to write music, but I didn't know how to write music, and so I've got all these books of really bad. It makes no sense. It's just jumble. It's like squiggles and it's like this is the composition, But I probably got into it when I had a really good teacher when I was probably 12, 13. And my teacher was also a TV composer, and he got me really excited about playing, I was playing a lot of jazz music then. And so, a teacher that can get you excited about music is an incredible thing. So, that changed everything I wanted to do.
I'm sure the music teachers listening, that will be something that they'll enjoy hearing.
Yeah. Really getting everyone on side this way.
Absolutely. Helena, what about for you?
Actually, I think my first music experience was probably choirs. I started in choirs really, really early, probably from the age of 7, because apparently I'd be listening to the radio and would always try to harmonise from when I was 4 or 5 years old. And so my mum thought she'd get me into some choirs. And then I went into piano, and I wasn't very good at practicing my scales, and instead I just spent my time just making up music and fudging my actual lessons with my teacher. But that's probably where I started kind of exploring making music, was probably, late primary school.
Right, fantastic. Fantastic. And Craig, for you, when did you start?
I reckon I would have been in grade 4 when I joined the junior band. The only music my school had was a brass band, so that's all I could do. About the same time, I started learning guitar in group lessons. So I went on to do year 12 trumpet and study at the conservatorium on classical trumpet. But I was probably about 13 when I joined my first rock and roll band. And being the youngest, I had to play bass. So that was another instrument that I sort of developed at an early age, yeah. Well, I think there are probably two really important things. One is for it to be really catchy and rememberable, to be a bit of an earworm. And the other is to sort of try and set up, I guess, the mood of the show. So in the Investigators, because it was based on a little detective agency at the primary school, we had a theme song that was sort of old-fashioned, sort of spy show or detective show, which was a lot of fun to do. And I think when I was growing up, theme songs were, I guess, really important for TV shows. And the theme from the show Get Smart was one that was really fantastic and really not simple, but very catchy and really set it up well.
I remember that one. I'm not sure whether some of our younger viewers might remember Get Smart, but yes, it was an incredibly popular show. Helena, what about for you?
Yeah, I would agree with Craig. It's that catchy element, that earworm thing where it kind of stays in your head almost to the point where sometimes it's annoying and you want to get it out of your head. It's kind of important that a theme has that ability so that it is memorable. I think also, not always, but for some themes, it's helpful if it's singable. If you can sing along to it or hum along to it, it's more likely to stay in your mind for longer and become something that you associate with the show.
And what about in terms of personal favourites for you? Were there any particular theme songs that stood out for you?
As a kid, I actually spent most of my time watching old musicals because that's what my parents were playing for me a lot. So I spent a lot of my time watching the very old Sound of Music. And that was the thing that for me was just amazing in terms of the musical themes and all of that. So I would say that's probably the thing that I loved most as a kid.
And Joff, what about for you? Personal favourites?
I watched a lot of, I don't know if this show's still on, but there was a show called Saturday Disney when I was growing up, and they had cartoons. I probably watched that way past, being a kid age, but I loved all those shows. So I loved all the themes like DuckTales, which I think is back again as well. All those like, I don't know what it is about them. It's just, they're really extra. I just love them. Those sorts of big sort of Disney theme songs. I love those.
And what about in terms of what you think makes a great kids theme song?
I probably, agree with everything that's been said, setting up the mood. I probably add, getting excited about the show, but something, I don't know how you do that, but if you can bring in certain elements of the show you want people to be excited about. And I'd also say, I think particularly for younger kids, TV shows, clarity can be a really important thing. What is helping, anything that the music can do to help with clarity. I could get really into that, but I'll give you a short answer and I'll just say clarity. but that's something that, the Wiggles do really particularly well is they'll focus on, is this a song about building blocks or is it about the colors of the blocks? And they don't mix the two. It's always like, we're building blocks or these are the colors of the blocks. It's not like we're building a red block and then a blue block. It's not like that. It's just one or the other, keeping it really clear. So when you're watching it, it's easy to understand, particularly for younger children. And then for the older kids shows, you can really get into some really fun stuff.
Right. We might flesh that out a little bit more, I think, with a couple of questions coming further down the track. What about for Ned and Josh, for you, a good kids TV theme and your favourites from the past?
Yeah, well, like everyone said, because themes are usually quite short, it's usually 30 or 60 seconds, it's got to be pretty catchy. And I remember when we worked on Thalu doing the theme song, the producers, one of their references was when you hear the theme song in the house and the kids are in the other room, they want to be able to run into that room because they can hear the song. So it's got to be iconic. Yeah, but one of my favourite theme songs is Ship to Shore. Everyone remembers that one. We were just listening to it this morning, and it's got the iconic pan flutes that open up. Yeah, that's probably one of my favourites.
Yeah, I like I echo what everyone else says about connection and mood, and in Thalu as well. It was really important that show has some story owners who are the Ngalama people of Roebourne, people indigenous to that area, and so the producer who was from that area wrote the song. And sometimes, it's the role of the composer or the producer to bring that to life is to collaborate and bring the voice out of a song that already exists, for example. So that happened again. We've done another show with them, which is coming out very soon, called Red Dirt Riders. And once again, it's sort of capturing the spirit of the show, if you like. That's what I think, for example, I think Joff does that beautifully with Bluey as well. I can hear the playfulness, and it's like a little game. It's a theme that gets heard a lot around my house. I've got a little 6-year-old, and it sort of has this repetition to it, and it sort of stops, and the characters stop dancing, and what's going to happen next? Oh, it's bingo, So it's kind of got this the spirit of the show built into it in a beautiful, simple way, and I think that's. There's a real art to that. We have another show that we do called 100% Wolf, and that's got the theme song for that one is aged a little older, so it's for 8 to 12-year-olds is the general brief. But really, we like to think it's for everybody. But we kind of think about what's going on for kids of that age, like the song, like the show does as well. And so the theme song of that one, it's actually called Pink and Freaky. It's a show about being an outsider in a way. That's the way I look at it, and all the good and bad things that can happen to you when you're on the outside. About Freddie, the pink poodle, but we tried to encapsulate that in the theme as well. That's really important.
And Josh, in terms of favourites that you had when you were younger, anything stand out?
Yeah, I was thinking of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme song. I remember.
Yes.
And what's great about that is it just repeats Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant. It kind of goes through all the notes of a simple scale, but it just keeps saying the lyric over and over again. When I listen to it now, I go, oh god. But when I remember my connection to it, it's really important. Yeah, so that's a good one.
It really depends on the project. It's. I think one of the skills as a composer is if you're choosing to write music for film and TV, you kind of have to be really able to write for anything. And a part of the skill of being a composer is, learning the ins and outs of all the different instruments that are available to you. Because if a director says, "Hey, we want this to be a brass band with a single bass clarinet," you have to be able to give that to them. So I think as a composer, you tend to develop a bit of your own distinctive sound. And sometimes, you end up with directors or producers who come to you specifically for that sound. So for me, that would probably be the kind of fusion of string instruments with synths. That's where I found my kind of happy place, and that's what I love writing for, and vocals as well. But that's what I love doing. But at the same time, like, I'm working on a project at the moment which doesn't have any of that, and it's mainly brass, actually, which is unusual. So you kind of just have to roll with whatever's going to be asked for, and just learn to develop your skills and really understand all the instruments inside and out as much as you can so that you're ready. Yeah.
And I imagine, Craig, you mentioned earlier about with the investigators having that sort of older detective sort of theme song feel about. So I imagine in terms of that type of project is in some way perhaps not dictating, but certain instruments would be better suited to that style of music. So would that be the case?
Absolutely. So, yeah, we used lots of brass instruments. We had a real drummer come in to play the theme. And we did lots of versions of that theme so that we could grab bits from it to morph into other cues to help keep that mood through the show. But then there are certain episodes where the mood will have to go somewhere completely different, and you might choose other instruments to go there. You might choose strings or something if you're trying to set up a different mood. So I guess there's themes that run through the show, and there's instrumental concepts that run through the show, but then you divert off that when it's needed to as well for sort of special parts of the show. For example, in the Little Lunch, we did it, there was a Halloween special. So there were parts of that where, we went all spooky theremin and so forth. So that was what was required for that episode, but it was a diversion away from the usual electronic pop music that we wrote for the rest of the show.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Joff, what about for you?
Oh, I probably echo what's already been said, really. It really depends on the project. I do a lot of, I have a big whiteboard when I'm first talking about a project, and whenever the whoever's making the show says a key word, like we want it to feel endearing or anything, I'll write it on the whiteboard, and that helps me. And then I've got this big jumble of madness, and then that helps me decide the instruments. For example, I did the show called The Family Law, and we were talking about endearing and giving. The thing that was missing from the show was, it wasn't missing from the show, but one they wanted to highlight in the show was a sense of homeliness or the family unit. And so I thought, probably an old upright piano that's something that you find in a home. And so I wrote a lot of the themes on that, for example. That's my approach, is to take those elements and of the macro, the overarching aspects of the show, and try to come up with an instrumentation list that sort of means something to do with that. Then I try to play it. As you'll see a bunch of, or maybe I can show. There's a piano here, some synths, keyboards. This thing's cool. This is an auto harp. Maybe I'll grab that just for fun, which is.
And not to mention your assistant there on the couch.
Yeah, this is Winnie. She's pretty lazy today. This is one of the instruments I use quite a bit. I think probably particularly through Bluey, I've developed a bit of my own sound. That's sort of, because I do so much of that sort of feeds into everything else I do. That sound, that sort of those instrumentation. But anyway, on to someone else.
Fantastic. So Ned and Josh, I know that you're both renowned for your electronic music. So for you, I assume you're using a whole range of that and other things in the different projects that you're working on too.
I'll show you some of our synths on our desk right now.
Wow.
Our playground. And it's sort of
so cool.
It's a place of play for us, I think. It's our happy place, like Helena said. And I think it incorporates, I'm not exactly answering the question, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but okay. It sort of incorporates what's important to us, and an element of play, an element of where we're at now. And I think we really try to bring that to every project. There's always a lot of pressure I feel a lot of pressure sometimes to be somebody else when I'm a composer, because you might get a piece of what's called temp music or reference music from someone that'll go, hey, yeah, I want you to sound like a brass band, or I'm not a fiddle player, for example. I want to have this beautiful solo fiddle music. And I really love that. And, for example, I would work with a fiddle player to try and bring their gold to the project, if you like. But yeah, it's absolutely whatever the project requires. I would also say that a lot of the projects we do, we're not exactly using all these synths here. It really is, like Joff saying, sort of narrowing it down into a little collection, a little band, if you like. If it gets a bit too broad, it sort of becomes a lollybag, what we call a lollybag sometimes, where it's not quite clear. It's sort of like you're just listening to the radio and you're cycling through all this different kind of music. So that was important on Failure, right? With the sounds we got. And
yeah, that's right. And it's finding the right texture, which is sort of a good starting point. Is finding that right feel and sound of a show, and then building the band around that texture.
Yeah.
And in the case of Thalu, which for those that aren't familiar with Thalu, given it was a series based in the Pilbara in Western Australia, and it was a really unique Indigenous series, were there elements of that you had to try to capture in terms of obviously the style of music and the instruments used that had to reflect that sort of unique Indigenous background to the series?
Yeah. We took quite a while trying to find the right soundtrack. We actually burnt a couple of months writing a whole bunch of music that didn't get used because it wasn't the right type of feel. But once we did find it, and it was sort of in the wheelhouse of acoustic and steampunk and metals, and that kind of sound that really reflected the area and the landscape. Yeah, once we found that sound, then it sort of came together naturally after that.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognise as well that, we do a few of these Indigenous projects, and Ned and I are not Indigenous, and so we don't pretend to make Indigenous music. That's for Indigenous people to make their music. But we try to provide some glue at the end, I guess. That's sort of the way we think of it. It is sort of bringing these different things together, which is like there's all this beautiful picture that's been shot in Thalu. It was all kids from the community acting in the show. It's one of the really beautiful things about the show for me, that there are these kids who aren't trained actors who are acting out the show. And also it's using mythology from the Ngalama people. The Thalu is a very important story to them. And it's actually Dalu, sorry, I always mispronounce it. It's Dalu is the way to pronounce it. And so what was I getting to? A good example is the next project we've done with them, Red Dirt Riders, we went a little deeper with that, and we got the kids from the community to start writing their own music. And that's really exciting for us. We work with a guy called Mark Lay, who is from Big Heart or Big Art. And he worked with the community kids up there to create their own music. And that made up almost half of the show. And we were really proud of that we could take a step back actually and allow for the kids to make their sounds and their music. And then we kind of just provided a little bit less glue, if that makes sense, to kind of fill in the gaps and some of the other music that wasn't there. So yeah, it's a big job finding the voice of a show, and instruments. The short answer is I think you pick from everywhere. Yeah, it's.
I haven't given this one too much thought. This idea of what skills you need for collaboration, but I would say, it's such a unique thing because people are so different, and every producer or director or filmmaker I've worked with has a different approach that they want to work with. I find, you could sort of. I always find it's best to try and treat it as a collaboration, even though they're your boss essentially. And I find it's really good to throw in my own ideas about what's there and be really honest and frank about I'll say, I think this story arc's not working. Maybe we can put this theme here and this theme here to help it, that sort of thing. And they might be going, excuse me, what do you mean that's not working? But most of the time it's just if everyone can see it comes from the place of you want the best for the TV show and you want to make something great together, and when you go into that and you're excited about making something great together, everybody can see that even if you that every idea you have, every suggestion, everything you're doing is about working together to try and get what's probably going to be the best solution and make the show as a whole great. I don't think I answered that question particularly well, but I think everyone else will do a better job.
That's fine. Helena, what about for you? What are those sort of collaborative skills that you think are fairly essential when you're working with other creatives?
I think one thing that almost surprised me was that even some of the most kind of experienced, amazing directors who've worked on incredible shows, incredible films, they get into the room with you and they might actually be really out of their depth when it comes to music. You know, they're film people and they might, you know, love film. They're incredible on set. They're incredible in the edit suite, but they come to you and they may not have a music background at all. And they're trying to communicate to you what they have in their head of what they want musically. And it's really hard to do that if you don't come from a musical background and you're talking to someone who you think is, you know, some kind of music expert. And sometimes that's actually quite intimidating for a director. So I think a large part of the composer's job is actually to make them feel really comfortable and to make it to feel like a really safe space to chat. A director might say to you, you know, we need the music here to feel sad. And what does that mean? You know, that could mean a whole lot of different things. Do you want it to feel really, really, really depressing? Or do you want it to just feel a little bit kind of ambivalent, a little bit happy, sad? There's a huge range in sad as a descriptor. And a large part of my job, I think, is trying to interpret what they actually mean by sad. Sometimes I do that by playing them references, playing them music and saying, is this kind of what you had in mind? And that way you can kind of start to narrow it down, because a lot of the feedback, a lot of the kind of music briefs that we all get, and I'm sure you can all relate, is, you know, we'll know it when we hear it. I don't know what I want, but I'll know it when I hear it. And that's the most challenging brief you can get, because I don't know what's in their mind. So it really is just about trying to create a safe space where they know that they can say whatever they want. There's going to be no judgment. It's a work in progress. As Joff said, it really is a collaboration and not they're your boss telling you what to do. They're coming to you because they know that you know what you're doing. So you should be kind of guiding them along the way while also listening to their vision and trying to interpret that. So yeah, collaboration's key, and just, you know, making them feel like none of their ideas are silly.
That's it. You might put that much better than me. I also had, just thinking about it now, is that I feel like, you know, you touched on it earlier, was like, but there's a element of interpreting things that from a non-musical perspective as well. And I remember one of the things that I've met a script writer once, a script editor, sorry, and they said one of their pet peeves was that they want characters to be likable, and that doesn't, you have to interpret likable. He said he always interprets that as relatable. So, because people don't want to see a character giving flowers out, they just want to relate to them, and that's what makes them likable in a way. So I feel like we do that a lot with music. When someone says, "Oh, it's got to be sad here," we kind of go, "Okay, what does that actually mean?"
Yeah, it's a real challenge, and you know, trying to say in words what you want musically. Sometimes that there is no word to describe what you want musically. So yeah, it's a really interesting part of the job, is the actual collaboration, the communication, you know, translating weird music sounds into words. Yeah.
Do you like that part of the job? That's probably my favorite, is sitting with people. And
I do. Yeah, I find it really interesting. And I find also the process of kind of watching, you know, when you're working with a director for the first time, you're always, I mean, I'm always a bit nervous, because I'm like, are we going to get on? Is this going to be a good match? And you know, sometimes they come in and they don't really know what they want. They feel a bit nervous about the process, and just kind of over the period of weeks, just seeing them feel more comfortable, you feeling more comfortable in their space, in the space of them, and you know, really working together towards that common goal of creating something amazing is yeah, really, really fun.
And I know, Craig, you've been fortunate to work with Robin Butler and Wayne Hope a number of times. Robin and Wayne have been responsible for adult comedies that people will be familiar with, as well as Little Lunch and The Investigators. I assume that's been a pretty fruitful collaboration with Robin and Wayne around their series for you.
It has, and I'm incredibly blown away by how respectful they are about creativity. So they always discuss it and try and work really hard to get their ideas across to me and vice versa. But still, the other collaboration will be the actual show itself. So when we start on a show and try and work out what its voice is going to be, what its sound is going to be, I find it really helpful to discuss it with them, get a starting point, but then I'll start on 2 or 3 ideas. And as the other composers here know, you never want to play anybody a cue or a piece of music until it sounds terrific. So, because to most people, things sound good or bad. They can't see beyond that. So, quite often, there's a fair bit of work involved before the show even starts in developing those 2 or 3 ideas to a point where you can present them and have them listen to them. And usually that gives you then a point of reference where they'll say, I like this one because, and you start to get a bit deeper into what they're after. So once we've found that, then it's a really easy collaboration because we know we're heading in the right direction. And the other thing that's really terrific to do as well is once we've found that voice or that sound of the show, is to do a whole bunch of little pieces of music that you can then get to the editors. So even when they're doing rough cuts, they can be using that sound of the show rather than plucking, temporary music off the internet and sticking it in.
We try and write the music as early as possible. So if any material that we can get before the production starts, where we can write the music and get a sense for the show that, like Craig said, you can give to the editors, so the editors avoid using temp music. That's really the most beneficial part of our job for scoring.
So when you say you want to come in as early as you can, would that be at a script stage, or you'd have at least some visuals to start from?
It would be during a script stage, and it's always better if we can see rushes or footage from a shoot, so we can get a better sense of the style. But yeah, as early as possible is always the best outcome at the end.
Yeah, I think it changes between projects as well. Definitely. 100% Wolf is a big 3D animated series, and so the whole world doesn't come together to the very end, really, but it's always a work in progress because they're constantly doing things called animatics and storyboards. So we see sketches of characters, and then we see them kind of block animated in a very basic way, and then we see them 3D animated, and then we see textures and colors get put on them. So it's kind of like this painting that's slowly being painted, if that makes sense. But we have to try to work with the director, especially, and the story makers to try and get the character right early. So there's a certain amount of intuition required there, which, to bring it back to your collaboration question, I think the sort of, you need to have some trust amongst the collaborators to have this sort of, I'm feeling this, or I'm intuiting this, this is my idea. Here's my idea, please don't destroy it. Or, please say no, but in a respectful way as well. Sometimes there can be, if that relationship isn't there, if there's someone who's a bit of a tyrant, let's say, which I've certainly seen in my career, it doesn't quite get as good a result, let's say that. So it is really collaborative, though. That question is really important. Music making in general, I think, is really collaborative. It's one of the beautiful things. If I think back to, I'll go back to my first answer of playing snare drum. It was playing snare drum in the concert band, that that we were playing like the Star Wars theme or something, or Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but I remember playing that in band. But we were all working together to make the music. So bands and musicians work together to make music. Directors and composers work together to make music. It's not going to be, if you're aspiring to be a composer, it's not going to be just up to you to make the music. You have to make it with other people.
Really good question. And I was a part of this. There's a big film festival in New York at the moment called Tribeca Film Festival. And I have a film there at the moment. And they set up this virtual composers lunch with all of the composers who had a film there over the weekend. And I was part of that. And there were 60 composers on this virtual lunch, which was for me at 3 a.m. in the morning. And there were, I think, 4 female composers and the rest were all male. So definitely there is a difference in terms of how many male composers, female composers, but a lot of people tend to, I hear a lot, women aren't getting opportunities in composing. And my experience isn't that, we're just not being chosen for jobs. I think that the problem is just way earlier where, I did composing for uni, and even in my uni degree, there were 20 people at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music, and 3 of us were girls. So I think the problem starts way earlier where it's not actually that, we're here and we're just not getting chosen for gigs. It's that there actually just aren't that many of us who become professional composers. And for me, I think that the reason for that is that at school, I wasn't, I don't think that I was at an all-girls school, and I don't think that an emphasis of technology was really a thing. And what you realize when you're a composer is you rely so heavily on technology. All of our music is written on computers. Since such a big part of what we do, you've got to have a real interest and curiosity for how speakers work and how microphones work, and be a bit of a gear nerd to be really good at what we all do. And I think that's just not really something that had in the past. Hopefully it's changed a bit now, but certainly in the past, I just got to uni as a composer and thought, I'm really excited to be a composer. And then I realized, oh, there are all these things that I don't know anything about. And all the boys in my degree were, nerding out on gear. And I felt like I was really a few steps back from that. And so I had to do a lot of catching up. And now I love the stuff, and I'm also a gear nerd and I love chatting about all of it. But, I just felt like as a girl, I was a bit behind in terms of that part of the role. So if there's any kind of advice I can give to girls who are wanting to be composers, just try to find a bit of curiosity and, how the software for composing works, learning about speakers, learning about microphones and how they work, and synths, and, listen to a lot of electronic music, and just try to develop that kind of curiosity, because the music, as a girl, we can do everything a guy does. And certainly when it comes to actually the music composing, there's no disadvantage being a girl as being a guy. It's just, for me, it was the gear stuff, which I just had to do a lot of catching up on. So hopefully in music now at school, everyone's learning a lot more about that at all schools. Yeah.
When I was, I think I was 14, 15, I had my first gig, which was playing piano in a restaurant. And I went to the restaurant for the first gig of this new job. I was super excited, and I saw the piano and I saw the restaurant full of people, and I just ran away. And I came back an hour later, and they said, I said, I am so sorry, I just got really nervous. And they said, oh, I didn't know you weren't playing. And I think there's something about that stuck with me, was if people are there to see you, they want you to do great and they're excited. And if they're if not, they just want to catch up with their friends and eat their dinner. So I try to remember that, but I still get very nervous. I don't know about everyone else, but when the director or whoever's behind me and I'm playing a cue for the first time, I don't turn around. I just like on the computer staring at the screen with them. And then at the end, I just sort of slowly try to turn around and see if I can glimpse if they've got an approving look or not. But yeah, I still get nervous. But yeah, I don't know if that's helpful. But
It is. Craig, what about for you?
Yes, I think any form of creative expression is very personal. So to present your creative expression to somebody, even in the film and TV world, where we've got lots of fences around what we're doing by style or you know what the job is, I think it's still, and I come back to that point where you end up spending a lot of time on your early ideas trying to get them presentable so that they can be as proud as they can be. But I think I'm not sure what you can do to develop confidence, because it's a natural part of our makeup is to, you know, it's so personal, making music. So definitely, you know, learning the skills, as Helena said, to you know, even things like mic placement and the really technical sides of what we do in recording, because, you know, there was a day when a composer would just be a composer, and then an arranger would take over, and then a conductor would take over, and an orchestra would take over. But we're everything now. We present the whole finished product. So you've got to be as good as you can at all those different elements of the job to try and present your ideas as best they can be, and as I say, as proud as they can be.
And Ned and Josh, just quickly, what about for you?
Yes, definitely. Always nervous about showing my stuff to other people. For me, it's my inner critic. And what I heard Joff say, in my words, was, it's really, it's my inner critic that's telling me that. It's not the other people out there. I can only try and guess what they're thinking or how they're going to feel. When I connect with music that I'm writing that I have a feeling about, that's when I can make a feeling that's going to connect to other people. And the inner critic is really important if you're a creative person. It's probably part of how you're going to get better, but learn to spot it and see where it works in your making. But don't let it drive you. Don't definitely be yourself and put your stuff out there. Yeah. And feel the fear and do it anyway. You're going to be afraid and you have to do it.
Yeah. And always be open to starting at the beginning again.
Yeah.
I think that's a real key. Some people can't do that, but I think you've got to be able to let go and then start again. Yeah.
And Helena, would you like to have the last word on that? How you cope with that?
I completely agree with what everyone said. That inner critic thing is such an issue. You know, you feel like you're giving a part of yourself when you're showing someone, you know, something that you've written. And I used to get really, really, really nervous about feedback that I was receiving. You know, I'd be at my computer, like looking at my emails, waiting for the feedback to come through, and I'd just be sweating on it, really, really scared. And at some point, I still am, but at some point I kind of reframed that as like, we're collaborating together. We both have the same goal. The director and I have the same goal, which is, you know, make this project, make this film, make this TV show as best it can be. And once I kind of changed the way I looked at it, like, we're collaborating, we're working on this together. There's going to be some feedback. I'm going to work on it. We're going to work on making it as good as it can be. I got a little less nervous about it. Less felt like I was kind of being judged, but yeah, it's still scary.
That's fantastic, looking at your emails.
Yeah.
if
Constantly like checking them. Oh God.
If 2 days go by, you think this is going to be bad.
Yeah, 2 days is bad. Yeah.
If you get home and the mobile rings after you've just sent it, that's good.
Yes, yeah. Start to pick up on some themes.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to finish up the webinar. We're a little bit over time, but I want to thank Ned, Josh, Joff, Helena and Craig. I think it's been incredibly valuable. So many wonderful insights.